It's that time again as Iron Country brings you the Fishing Hole. Keep up to date with the latest products and learn fishing tactics from some of the best anglers across North America.
Let's give him a warm welcome this morning to the Fishing Hole. 2014 National Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame inductee Dale Stroschein. And this week's guest, we are going to introduce to you Larry Smith from Larry Smith Outdoors. We bring you another fantastic guest this week. It's legendary Al Linder on the Fishing Hole.
And my pleasure to be here, Jerry. Looking forward to it.
Here's your host, Hurricane Jerry.
Good morning, Hurricane Jerry with you as we talk fishing in the State Line area every Saturday morning at 7:20 a.m. on Iron Country 1019 and 1490. You can actually stream anywhere on your desktop at ironcountry.fm or even download the free TuneIn radio app from your Google Play Store and listen from your mobile device. And the Fishing Hole this morning brought to you by Harbor Recreation, Southern Wisconsin's boating headquarters on Lake Koshkonong. You can check them out at harborrec.com. Last week, we had Mel Stottlemyre Jr. from Stotts Fishing Adventure on the show, and we thought we'd do a two-part show. Last week, we talked about the guide service and how he got into fishing, and Mel's passion is walleye fishing. My passion is walleye fishing, and we're going to trade notes and kind of compare what it's like to walleye fish here in the Midwest versus the Northwest. So, Mel, welcome back again to the Fishing Hole, and let's talk a little walleye fishing. Tell us a little more in depth about walleye fishing in the Northwest.
Wow, thanks for having me back on. Yeah, the fishing in the Northwest is, in this I'm just going kind of compared to the other fisheries that I've fished throughout the United States, mainly the Lake Erie area and some of the other lakes around Minnesota, and it really is entirely different. And I say that because most of my fishing is done in rivers, and our rivers throughout the Northwest have dams on them, so the water flow becomes a major factor. And whether the water's up or down, and trying to trigger these walleye to bite. And probably the biggest battle that most people face is finding them, because they do move up and down our rivers chasing bait. And usually when you find them, you can get them. But that seems to be the biggest battle for novice walleye fishermen,
right,
in the Northwest. And we have our share of lakes and reservoirs as well, and they'll ice over, and some people will target them from ice fishing as well. But I personally enjoy the river fishing, and somewhere where the rivers where I've chased steelhead and salmon all my life. I get an opportunity to chase walleye now.
Yeah, that's you're kind of like me. I'm a river rat, and I like fishing walleye. You know, I don't know, there's certain times of the year that I don't mind. I like fishing walleyes on lakes and stuff like that, but river fishing, you don't know what you're going to catch, at least here in the Midwest. And now we have a distant cousin to the walleyes. Have you ever caught a sauger before?
I never have.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. If you've never caught a sauger, they're a distant cousin of the walleye. We've got them here in our area, and what they are is they've got they look kind of like a walleye, but what's different, their dorsal fins have like small black dots on them, and the walleye has the back fin has a white tip where the sauger doesn't, and the markings they got blotches on them. And yeah, we've got them. They don't get quite as big as a walleye, but a trophy sauger is probably, here in the Midwest, I would say 4 or 5 pounds, maybe 22, 23 inches. And then sometimes you'll have the walleye and the sauger, they'll spawn together and you'll get a saugai. But the saugais don't reproduce. So, yeah, I found that interesting. I think there might be some lakes, there might be stock. Maybe it's Montana. I just watched a fishing show recently, and there's some saugers out west somewhere. I can't remember, but
yeah, they haven't got out to our rivers yet.
Yeah,
the closest thing that resembles a walleye until really what I knew what a walleye was is, of course, our perch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're part of the they're part of the perch family or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, we've got them in our area, and and one thing about the saugers, they. Especially in rivers, they got a little more fight to them. They're a little more aggressive, and then in cold spring days when you've got cold fronts in, usually the walleyes won't bite, but the saugers will. So you've got action no matter what, and that's what I've noticed fishing for in the last 25 years or so. I guess what are when you're traveling, and like you're saying, we're talking off air. Sometimes you get a chance to do some fishing when you're traveling with the Marlins or in the past with some of the other Major League Baseball teams you've been with. You get a chance to do any walleye fishing? I know you like Erie. When you've gone to Cleveland, I take it, right?
I do, and I've, being in the baseball world, there's obviously lots of stress, and anytime you get an off day, and I'm traveling out Midwest, I always look to go to Lake Erie, and it's such a wonderful fishery. I haven't ventured out a whole lot around the Milwaukee area, a little bit down in Minnesota, and I always look forward to going with a couple different guides and trying to pick some tricks up and learn some things, because they're ahead of the game in the world of walleye, and they've done it a lot longer than the people here in the Northwest. So I always look forward to trying to learn something back there and trying to implement it into our system here and see those tactics do in fact work. And the one thing about the river, it's fluctuating water flows, and then the structure is so different. The river breaks, and so there's not a whole lot of like flat fishing for these fish to come up off the ledges and get on those flats and chase bait. It's there's structure, there's rocks, there's wood, there's gravel, and there's so many different areas to fish that are different throughout the river system, and the seasons, things change as well.
Yeah, well, that's one of my doing this show the last 3 years, I've learned and met so many people and fishing guides, and there's a guide up in Marinette, and I'm going to give him a plug, Brian Claremont. He's kind of a river guy. I am too. And last year we were fishing for walleyes up there, and he invited me to come up and fish with him. And he says you want to try to have your baits close to the bottom. Most of the time, walleyes are bottom huggers, but what he uses like a 2 to 3 ounce weight, kind of like an egg sinker, with about a 2-foot lead up to the 3-way, and then he'll run a 6-foot lead out with a floating original Rapala. Now he'll use a 13 or 18. That's a pretty big bait, but since what he'll do is he'll drop that down and then go upriver about 1 mile an hour against the current, and he'll pull it and pull it kind of like snap it a little bit, and then as the bait falls back, that's when the walleyes will hit, because you're constantly staying in contact with the bottom, because like you say out west, your river fluctuates in your levels, and you're constantly staying tight to the bottom. And I took that tactic there and brought it to here, 3 hours south here on the Rock River in Lake Koshkonong, which is about I'd say about an hour outside of Milwaukee. And I tell you what, it worked. So I might have to show you that trick, unless you already know about it.
Well, I don't, but we do a lot of leaded line fishing, and then I use a lot of drop weights. If I find a specific plug, and I'm doing just that same thing, pulling up river at about 1 to 1.5 against the current, and I need to get my plug down, I'll use either leaded line or I'll use a drop weight. Use a lot of bandits, large profile, early in the morning, trying to hug the shore. And again, you're not dealing with a flat, you're dealing with lots of structure and ups and downs. So there's a lot of zigzagging going around. I remember the one time I got my 18.5 pounder. I was going at about 3 miles an hour, and I was just cutting in and out in this 12 foot of water. and fish were in feeding. And that particular night, I think we got a couple 10s and 12s, and then I got that 18.5. So it's most all of our fishing is getting down to the bottom here on the river.
Right.
I know sometimes, I go out to Lake Erie, and those guys will fish suspended fish, and I've tried it on our rivers. It just doesn't seem like they suspend much when they're chasing the bait.
Yep.
They all seem to be down, but they'll feed up under the shoreline, and they'll move out, and I'll target them, with some bottom bouncers and harness and big fishing and blade baits and whatever I can entice them with.
Right. That's pretty much, that's how it is fishing here in the Midwest for walleyes, just how you explained it, too. It's a lot different than lakes like the Bay of Green Bay. I was up there last July, and we were catching walleyes suspended. We're 24 feet of water, but we're running our crawler harnesses 18 feet down, and we're in the zone and we were catching them. But yeah, it seems like the Great Lakes, or even on Lake Geneva, which is about 40 minutes southwest of Milwaukee, which I'm going to be fishing here next week or two, pretty heavy here. That's one of the last lakes to freeze up because it's 150 feet deep, but you've got really steep drop-offs, and those fish will suspend out. The walleyes out there will suspend in, say, 80 feet of water. They'll suspend probably, in the water column, they're probably about 20 feet to 30 feet down, but as the sun sets, they slide in and go shallow in about 10 to 12 feet of water. Sometimes this time of year you can catch them in 3 feet of water. So it's totally different. You got to approach each lake and each body of water so different from walleyes. That's why I find it challenging trying to catch them.
Sure, I hear you.
Yeah, I got to ask you, Mel. I get pretty pumped up when I catch a 10, 12 pounder, in the boat or whatever it may be, or big walleye. It's kind of like playing baseball. We get high-fiving, and it's just like hitting a home run or a game-winning home run. You get kind of like that way too, or?
You know what I tell people, and I've really learned to enjoy the guiding and watching people get excited.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, when I'm back there running the motor, I still, to this day, feel like I'm fishing, and I high-five the client, and I get just as big a thrill for them catching that fish as if I was doing it.
Yep.
And I would tell people, if that goes away, there's a problem.
Yep, exactly.
That's exciting. Even a 16-inch walleye, which is still a nice fish. I get a thrill out of every fish I catch, but nothing like getting the big ones either. That's on a crankbait or something.
That's true. And being a guide, you probably, like you just said, it's always nice to teach somebody something and see them have success for it. I get just as big as a thrill seeing them succeed in the water as I did if I caught that fish. And I'm sure being a guide, you feel the same way.
I do. And, I always pick their brain before we get started, and I'll give them some options on the methods and techniques, and just try to find out their level of experience. But I always take the approach of, by the end of the day, I want to teach them something new, a different technique and a different way to catch fish, as long as the fish are cooperating. And that's why I kind of push myself to pick people's brains that are considered experts to push myself to learn new techniques as well and try to implement them out here. So, as you noted, there's so many different ways and so many different factors, and you really have to stay open to all of them. When I go walleye fishing, I got about 20 rods in my boat, and I'll have jigging rods and crankbait rods and my harness rods, and
right,
my blade baits rods, and they seem like they're all a little bit different for each technique, and I just stay open to what the fish want.
Exactly. Yeah, you definitely got to keep an open mind when targeting walleyes. And if you're just tuning in, Mel Stottlemyre Jr. is our guest. He is owner and operator of Stotts Fishing Adventures. He's got 6 full-time guides, right? Mel, am I right? 6?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want to book a trip with Stotts Fishing Adventures out in the Lewiston, Idaho area, Mel, tell our listeners briefly some of the fish you target real quick here before we let you go.